morning, guys, and welcome to the Monday Movie Memo Memorial Day edition, holiday edition, and we're talking about X-Men Days of Future Past, which dominated the box office frame, will probably continue to do so today, and is looking to be the second highest grossing opening weekend of any X-Men film, right behind X-Men The Last Stand, Brett Ratner's 2006 film. It's worth noting that Days of Future Past did significantly better than First Class, which opened somewhere in the $50 to $55 million range, which was tough because it was a reboot of the X-Men franchise and it was introducing a lot of new characters played by actors who people weren't exactly familiar with yet. James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, even Jennifer Lawrence at the time was popular, but not quite, Jennifer Lawrence, which she is now. So Days of Future Past off to a roaring red hot start. It's going to be a big hit for 20th Century Fox. It's going to be a great step in the future of the X-Men franchise. And I think it should be the last X-Men movie and Wolverine movie that Hugh Jackman does, as you can probably tell by the title of this story. Let me preface this by saying that I think that Hugh Jackman is unbelievably awesome as Wolverine. And I'm on record in my review, which is on this site, as saying that his portrayal of Wolverine, even though it's the seventh time that he's playing the character, his portrayal in Days of Future Past is the absolute best performance as Wolverine, the best use of him as Wolverine that they've had in an X-Men film. And I even reference it back to the very first X-Men that Bryan Singer did, where Wolverine was the sort of badass comic relief, and they really figured out how to personify Wolverine, and it was just perfect casting, and Jackman has been stellar in the role throughout the entire franchise, and all of the one-off origin films and the Mangled film, and he's just been Mr. Reliable, and he's been unbelievably good in the role, and he's great in Days of Future Past. But it's time to stop. We're going to have a piece on the site a little bit later today wondering how the changes... Oh, and here's what I'm going to talk about. We are getting into massive spoilers. We're going to talk about Days of Future Past and the X-Men series as if you've seen Days and you know how it resolves. So if you haven't seen Days of Future Past yet and you clicked on this by accident, go away. I'll wait. 3, 2, 1. You're still here? I'm going to open up the spoilers. So Days of Future Past ends with the timeline being corrected. Wolverine is successful in his mission to the past. He realigns the X-Men series to a certain extent and kind of corrects a lot of the sins of the previous films. So he wakes up in a future where Charles still has the school, and a lot of characters that we didn't think were around anymore are back. Cyclops is there, and Rogue, we see Rogue briefly, and Jean Grey is there. So the Phoenix Saga that was portrayed sloppily in X-Men The Last Stand didn't happen. And Wolverine is back with his true love, with Cyclops there still cock-blocking. And it's a perfect ending. And the funny thing is, we're going to write about in a separate piece how, changing the timeline sort of messes with James Mangold's ability to do this standalone Wolverine sequel that he wants to do, because when do you do it? Like, do you do it in the 80s when X-Men Apocalypse is supposed to take place? Do you do it in this new timeline? I mean, it's a question that needs to be answered if you want to do an X-Men or a Wolverine sequel. I say don't answer it. There's no need to do any more Wolverine movies. This is the definitive ending. It's his best portrayal as Wolverine. And somehow the stars have aligned. It's nearly impossible that this happened. By introducing the First Class universe, you're able to do Days of Future Past, and you're able to give some closure and give Wolverine, or put Wolverine back in a spot where he is around the team that he initially founded, with Professor Xavier and Cyclops and Jean and Rogue and all these characters that were so important to him and to the franchise in the launching of the initial one. And now Fox can continue to explore X-Men films with the First Class team like they planned on doing. You can have McAvoy and Fassbender, and you can get into the 80s, and you can have Nightcrawler and roll Gambit out if Channing Tatum wants to play him, and you don't need Wolverine anymore. Because if you try and do a standalone Wolverine film now, I just don't know how it fits into this new revised and course-corrected timeline. I think it's time for Jackman to hang up the claws. And again, I can't emphasize enough, it has nothing to do with the way that he's done it. I just think he needs to capitalize on the fact that they've somehow scripted him this fantastic ending. He was the driving force behind this latest X-Men film. It gave him a starring role. It gave him a tidy but not forced ending, a happy ending for Wolverine. To explore it any further is just unnecessary. And I'm not saying that you can get rid of Wolverine as a character, but if you want to roll him out in the 80s or in X-Men adventures that take place in what we can now consider the past, cast a younger X-Men. I mean, there's creative ways around this problem, but I just think it would be a perfect opportunity to Jackman to just say, I'm going out on a high note. We've got a hit. It's critically acclaimed. This was my seminal work as Wolverine, and what more do I need to do in the role? I mean, there are a couple other storylines that he suggested that they might want to do as adaptations of feature films, but you don't need them. You don't need him. He's done it. He's done it. He has put his stamp on Wolverine by doing it 7 times, and this is a great opportunity for him to end on a high note. I'd be sad to see him go. I just think that this is the right opportunity for him to ride off into the sunset and leave his portrayal of this amazing character in a cinematic museum now for us to appreciate for years. So you may totally disagree. You may want 7 more Wolverine films or X-Men films that involve Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. Let me know what you think. Is this the great opportunity for Wolverine to for Hugh Jackman to hang up his Wolverine claws and to say, I did it, it's done, this was a good time to end? Or do you hope that he comes out and says, we're doing Wolverine 2 with James Mangold, and I'll be back for Age of Apocalypse, and on and on and on and on and on, forever into eternity? Weigh in the comment section below. Continue to read all of our X-Men Days of Future Past coverage on Cinema Blend. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend, and thank you so much for tuning in to the Monday Movie Memo.